What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new Mount Josmore. I'm your host, Jaws, the man with his face on the mountain. Right here. This is me. This is my show. And if you've been paying attention, Mount Josmore is all about the fun, wild world of me picking my favorite top 4 things about a certain topic and discussing some honorable mentions who are near the top but not on the top personally for me. As usual, the rules are, this is my list, so I can't miss. This is my opinion, and you are entitled to your own. I am entitled to mine. You can voice your opinion in the comments section on the video. I do ask politely and professionally that you keep it sane, simple, and civil in the comments section. Nobody needs an internet troll in their lives, and let's be honest, just because you have an opinion doesn't mean it's right. Just because I have one doesn't mean it's right either. It's just right to me in my world. So, that being said, this week's topic, if you are like me and you are a fan of some of the nerdier things in life, OMG, it is a holiday week for all of us here in the wrestling world. It is WrestleMania week, and I am fired up. I am gassed up. This WrestleMania is due to be good. I don't care what the internet wrestling community says. This is going to be a fun one. Fired up for the Jey Uso Gunther match. Fired up for the John Cena Cody Rhodes match. There's a lot going on here. A lot of good stuff happening in the world of wrestling. It is WrestleMania week, and I am fired up. And in honor of that, in honor of WrestleMania, I had to do a WrestleMania Mount Rushmore, right? And I had a lot of thoughts on this and how I could do this. If I was just going to do generic wrestling, my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, my Mount Rushmore of finishing moves, entrance music, entrances. There's a lot to do, right? There's a lot to unpack in the world of wrestling. And in a conversation with a friend of mine who is kind of paying attention along with the show and kind of helping me out along the way, shout out Matt Johnson once again. Check out his stuff, especially his Eat Sleep List show here on YouTube, and check that out. Matt is, him and I were talking about how to do this, how to go about my Mount Rushmore, and we decided it had to be WrestleMania specific, right? It had to be specific to WrestleMania. And going through every WrestleMania match to pick my Mount Rushmore of matches, there's 2 that are very easily on that list, but then the rest I'm like, and that's a lot of matches to go through, right? So what we're going to do is I decided we're going to go through my Mount Rushmore of WrestleMania performers. The people who put WrestleMania on the map, kept it on the map, or grew it to an insane level to a point that it is now a 2-night event. WrestleMania, the first one of its kind, was a trial and error run put together, and it was supposed to be the biggest wrestling show ever, and it could have went one of 2 ways. It could have been gangbusters, which it kind of was, or it could have torpedoed and fallen apart. It did not, and we are years and years later, and it has grown from a 1-night-a-year spectacle to a 2-night-a-year, over the course of a weekend, spectacle. They include a massive show for the NXT brand for WWE. There is the Hall of Fame induction is mixed in this weekend as well. It is a showcase. They call it the Showcase of the Immortals. It is the biggest wrestling event in the world. And whether you are a WWE fan or not, if you are a wrestling fan that does not like WWE and you're an AEW guy or a New Japan guy, whatever, girl, whoever you are, you cannot deny the fact that WrestleMania is the pinnacle, right? Like this is the show. Everyone dreams. If you are in the professional wrestling world and if you tell me your dream is not to be first off, to be on WrestleMania, then have a match at WrestleMania, and then to be the main event of WrestleMania, you tell me that is not your goal and you are in the professional wrestling world, I'm going to call you a liar. That would be like saying, I want to play pro football, but I'm okay just winning just being in the CFL and winning a CFL championship. No. If you play football, you want to go to the Super Bowl. You want to be in the Super Bowl, and you want to be the MVP. Like I don't care how you cut it. You want to be the MVP because that is what being in the main event of WrestleMania equates to, in my opinion. You play hockey, but you don't want to win a Stanley Cup. You're full of crap. Knock it off. Say what you will, say it how you will. Anybody who says they don't care to ever headline WrestleMania, who is in the profession, in my opinion, is full of crap, and they're lying to you. That being said, WrestleMania would not be the show that it is without specific certain people and what they have done for the business and in the world of professional wrestling, specifically on the night of WrestleMania. WrestleMania is the type of night that can make or break careers in the professional wrestling realm, and there are people who have made their career by being one of those guys on and at WrestleMania. First and foremost, there are three here in my honorable mention. Before I get to that, honorable mention. This man does not deserve to be talked about. This man does not deserve any type of error or press, but he's going to get some because if it was not for Vince McMahon, there would not be WrestleMania. And I already put somebody on my Mount Rushmore that is kind of in the same boat. He doesn't deserve to be up there, but you cannot deny the fact that WrestleMania would not be what it is if not for him in his era, which that may be a spoiler. I don't know. But Vince McMahon was the brainchild. WrestleMania is the brainchild of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon saw this vision. And Vince was always, if you watch the Vince McMahon documentaries, you basically learned that he saw things in a way that other people didn't. He saw the bigger picture. He saw how big this could be and how big he turned it into. And to say that you were going to have a show like WrestleMania ever in a world where it was territories and, you tried, if you tried stealing one of their guys, they're going to try to steal one of your guys and, talk people into moving to a different area to defend belts in different territories and cross promotions. And he went, no, we're going to pool all the best talent to one spot and we're going to throw a party and it's going to be called WrestleMania. And he did it. You could not have WrestleMania without Vince McMahon. And that is the end of that conversation because, again, Vinnie Mac's done a lot of weird and crappy things in his life, and I don't think he deserves to be talked about on my show anymore. But I couldn't talk about WrestleMania without mentioning it. So, boom. Done. Off the dishonorable mention with Vinnie Mac. And on to the honorable mention. People who do deserve... I'm about to backtrack on those words. One third backtrack. People who had some amazing WrestleMania moments that will go down in history. And these three I lumped together because the moment was very, very similar. And they're all undersized guys, right? They're guys that were not considered big enough in the hulking individual era. And just in the hulking world of professional wrestling, you look at these guys and you think larger than life. You think of, you got guys that are 6'8", 6'9", 7 foot, 7'4", 6'4" and 6'5" look small, and then you have these guys that are 5'10", or some guys even smaller, like 5'7", 5'8". Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and I will only say his name one time, Chris Benoit. These guys all had that smaller stature. They're not towering individuals. They're a little bit shorter. A little bit on the shorter side. Ray had his bulk up era where, he really started eating a lot of protein apparently and just packed on a ton of muscle. So he looked like he could compete and hang with some of the bigger guys. Eddie Guerrero, same thing. Eddie Guerrero was always in great shape, and then he hit a point where he was just shredded out of his mind. The third guy on the list didn't ever have that problem. He always looked the part, but because he wasn't overly tall. And one of those three, the one who I will no longer mention, screw it. Benoit was not flashy, right? He was down home, gritty, grind you into dust on the mat. And he is, all three of them kind of had their comeuppance story, or they finished their story, as they'll say. That's a common phrase in the wrestling world these days. Thanks, Cody. But they all had their moments where I want to say Benoit entered the. He pissed off McMahon and the character McMahon, and he ended up being forced into the Royal Rumble in the number one spot, and he survived the whole thing and won it. Guerrero, through everything he went through in his life, to come to that point where he headlined WrestleMania. Mysterio, same thing. And, you can make the claim that Mysterio only got to do it because Eddie passed away, and it was an homage to Eddie that Ray got his. But Ray had more than one title run, but he got his WrestleMania moment. You can't mention it because those three were, especially because I'm 90% sure Benoit and Guerrero were, I want to say, the same night. So they didn't headline WrestleMania. One of them did. I think they went back-to-back, co-main event style. And, when they both won their match, they celebrated together at the end of the show, if memory serves. And I could be wrong. As you know, I do some research, but I don't refresh myself on everything because I kind of talk myself into stuff that I can't plan for. So memory serves, those two celebrated together in the ring after they won their respective titles that night. But had their huge moment, but they weren't the guys. They didn't center multiple WrestleManias around these guys. The rest of this list, you can kind of, the rest of my honorable mention, you can absolutely say they did. Going back to some of the old school style, Bret Hart, Bret was, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Particularly his Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12 was legendary for its intensity and quality of wrestling. The man just went out, he was the type of dude that, he was so good in the ring. He had some personality, he had some flair, but not to the level of a guy like a Ric Flair. He wasn't the big talker on the mic. And I do think some of that to some extent did take away from Bret, but he was so good in the ring you couldn't ignore him. He had some really, really great moments at WrestleMania. But I personally can't put him on my Mount Rushmore just because when I think WrestleMania, his name doesn't pop, right? It doesn't fly off the handle. Ric Flair, another one. Another great, great talent. Could talk. Was excellent in the ring. One of the best sellers of all time, in my opinion. Kind of redefined the game with some of the selling he did. Plenty of guys did certain things, that were likened to Flair. Flair takes a move, one of my favorite ones, gets whipped into the turnbuckle, fires right out, hands up, comes out, and then just face plants. People put different spins on that over the years, but when you originate something, I think it's pretty good. Hard not to throw Ric Flair in an honorable mention here. Big real Ric Flair fan myself, but again, when I think WrestleMania, he has moments, but I don't think Ric Flair is WrestleMania. Moving into somebody who has been, and I was a huge fan of this guy, of The Rock, Dwayne, good old Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I was a huge fan of his growing up. Everybody, grew up. It's hard to see because I'm wearing a hat, but I can do a little bit of the people's eyebrow. Taught myself how to do that in the mirror because I wanted to be like The Rock. But lately, in my opinion, and I think his current persona and his current aura has taken away from the WrestleMania Mount Rushmore worthiness of The Rock. Part of it, he didn't have a lengthy career. He didn't do it for a long time. He did it really well, skyrocketed to the top, and was around for a good chunk of the Attitude Era, and coming out of the Attitude Era toward the Ruthless Aggression Era, kind of. But he had some great moments. But looking back, I remember him more in a host or special guest capacity than I do in a WrestleMania moment capacity. He came out, it was one of the first times he came back in recent memory where he came out and he was playing with the blowtorch fire shooter thingy. Great words. Awesome sentence. Flamethrower, that's what I'm looking for. But he did that where he wrote, he lit the Rock letters on fire, so they were, whatever. He came back and did his once in a lifetime match with Cena, and then he did it again the next year for twice in a lifetime, where Cena got to turn around on him. And then lately, like last year, he came back and it was going to be, people didn't think anyone wanted to see Cody Rhodes against Roman, so they were going to throw The Rock in the mix and give Cody the other belt, and then they got a ton of backlash about that, because how does The Rock, who just signed on his ownership, get to just come back and insert himself into the title picture? And there was some behind the scenes stuff there that didn't make him look so good in that realm. And I mean, the dude left for Hollywood. He, would pop in and, hey, how are you? See you later. Cheap pop and whatever. I don't think he's deserving of a mention, because he's such a big name. He's such a famous person as a whole. But you can't, in my opinion, rope him into the best, the GOATs, if you will, of WrestleMania, because he just wasn't there enough. Two other guys on this one that are in that same realm, and it's not that they weren't there enough because they went to Hollywood, but because their careers took them in different ways. They had a great match together, so I'm going to mention these two back to back. First one, Kurt Angle. I'm a huge fan of Kurt Angle. Obviously, the only Olympic gold medalist, at least at the time, that WWE ever had. He made the transition from technical Olympic wrestler to professional wrestler and sports entertainer. And I know a lot of people hate that word, but like, it's an important part of it, right? Like, the ability to entertain is what makes you a good professional wrestler, right? Like, there have been some legit badass tough guys that have stepped in the ring, and while you could take them credible, like, they weren't entertaining. A good example for me is a guy like Matt Riddle, or even a Bobby Lashley, right? Like, Lashley fought MMA, Riddle fought MMA. They are legitimate badasses, like guys that you would not want to fight on the street. And, not that you'd want to fight Lashley with his stature anyway, but, the fact that they're trained to know how to do what they're doing is another story too. So with all that in mind, we look at this and we say, okay, so you're a legitimate badass. You could actually beat a guy in a fight. Most guys that step in the ring with you could beat in a fight. But are you entertaining? Right? Because it's not UFC. It's not an MMA fight. Like, the entertainment in that is the intensity and the fight itself. The entertainment in pro wrestling is, can you talk? Can you perform? Can you sell? Do your moves look realistic? Can you make other guys' moves look realistic, even if they're not? Stuff like that. And, that's something that a lot of guys who live in that, amateur wrestling world, amateur quote unquote, or Olympic wrestling world, struggle to do, because they're used to grinding on the mat and, grinding for the entirety of the match. And they're, obviously with pro wrestling, they're, the stage and the pomp and circumstance behind it. Angle did this fantastically. He steered into, like, they gave him the American hero gimmick, and then the "you suck" chants started raining out during his entrance. And then, he kind of became the pompous, intelligence, integrity, and intensity guy. And, it was great. He did really, really well. His two finishing moves were fantastic. He knew how to sell. He knew how to entertain. He was solid on the mic. He could be goofy. He could be intense. Everything. In my opinion, he didn't do enough WrestleManias for, and some of it was health related. There's the Perk Angle stuff going that's out there that he needed to step away and fix stuff in his personal life, and then he ended up going over to TNA for a while, and just it is what it is. I mean, I just don't think he did enough. And his most memorable WrestleMania moment was a banger of a match against Brock Lesnar. Lesnar should be near the top of every professional wrestling list ever, except, much like Angle, Lesnar, he did it in a couple stints. He didn't do a ton at WrestleMania, right? Like, early on in Lesnar's career, he was the next big thing, and he was up there, and he was with, he was going against The Rock, and he was going against, all these guys, and he was just ragdolling people. And, at the height of his hype, he walked away, because he basically said, "You're not paying me enough for my time, and for my time." And he was like one of the first guys, and he had no plan. He had nothing to do. He was just like, "I am Brock freaking Lesnar, and I don't need this." He's not a people person. He's not a partier. He wants to live in his ranch in Saskatoon with his wife and kids, and do and farm and work and lift and Then he decided he wanted to play football, and he had a run as a second stringer with the Vikings for a short period of time. And then he went to Japan, and he was a huge draw over there. And the guys in Japan loved working with him because he was more of that intense, strong style that they like over there. He never came back and wrestled stateside for a while, but then he got into MMA, and he was pretty damn good at that too, until he lost like 27 feet of intestine to a disease. And he was never quite back, but it derailed a promising career in that. And then he came back, right? And he's had some WrestleMania moments since then. But the Lesnar Angle match was an absolute classic. He broke his neck doing a backflip off the goddamn rope. If you haven't seen it in its entirety, it's worth the watch. I promise. But again, the 10-year hiatus or so that was in there, definitely hurts the WrestleMania legacy side of things, because for like you think of Lesnar's WrestleMania moments, you think of the Angle match, you think of his match against Goldberg the first time with Stone Cold as the special guest referee, and just kind of meh, right? Like that was bad. That was a bad match. And then that when they came back, they ran it back, and it wasn't much better. Anything Goldberg was involved with after his initial run in WCW just was lackluster at best. And I just don't think Lesnar did enough at WrestleMania to be on Mount Rushmore, but he's so damn good, it's hard not to reference him. And then he's also got all the allegations against him and shit alongside his buddy Vince. So probably never see him in pro wrestling again, but you never know. Never say never, right? My next one here is Stone Cold Steve Austin. I just mentioned him in line with Mr. Lesnar and his special guest referee. And Stone Cold is probably, if I really sat down and thought about it, he's probably on my list, my Mount Rushmore of pro wrestlers as a whole, because I don't think WWE in the Attitude Era survive without him. As much as, the NWO DX Wars and stuff like that, and the Monday Night Wars centered around those two. One of the guys who really came to prominence in and out, coming out of that era, was Stone Cold. And, he was a dude, he could be he was the anti-hero, right? Like he was a bad guy, but he was a good guy, right? Like, so he was a good guy who did good things the bad way, right? Like the beer drinking, ass kicking redneck, and he's this guy that's out here just, you're not supposed to cheer for that dude. You're supposed to cheer for the milk drinking Olympic hero, but we didn't. And, but I'm trying to think top of my head here. Stone Cold, he had that, he had a match with Bret Hart at WrestleMania, which ushered in the Attitude Era. We all remember it. It was I believe he passed out. He didn't tap to the sharpshooter. It was, he had the crimson mask on, bleeding out of his face, and, just had the look about him. It was awesome. It was great. But he, there's not a ton where you're like, oh, that one, like how many of those did he have, right? You can think of one off the top of your head, maybe one or two more, but like when we get up to these top guys, who's on my Mount Rushmore, it's a tough list to crack. It really, really is. And then my last one on my honorable mention is Hunter Hearst Helmsley, or Triple H. Long career, plenty of WrestleManias. My biggest thing with him is, to me, in my opinion, in my recollection, Triple H is known more for his extravagant entrances at WrestleMania than he is his matches at WrestleMania. We're talking about a dude who found a different way to look like a badass with a sledgehammer, skull thrones, and crowns made of skulls, and 2, 3, 4 different versions of that. He came out to Motorhead playing both his entrances. I'm pretty Motorhead was at one where they played the game, and then the next one they played King of Kings. The man came out to live music with extravagant props. There was the one, him and Stephanie came out together. They were both dressed like the savage Viking, Neanderthal king and queen people, whatever. But again, could I tell you who what those matches were and who he was up against at the time? Not even a little bit. So, that one's tough. Like, it's hard for me to really wrap my head there, because if the only thing I'm remembering you for off the top of my head, if the thing that when I think Triple H WrestleMania pops into my head is how you came to the ring, how much of an impact did you have? You took advantage of being on a grand stage with a massive budget. I don't blame you. I would do it too. If I had that kind of budget, I would be in a really cool, badass studio, not sitting in my home office doing this. But beggars can't be choosers, right? Maybe someday I'll do a podcast at WrestleMania and they'll pay for me to have all kinds of cool, fancy tricks. Doubtful, but you never know. And with that, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes here. Couple other people I could have mentioned here: Edge, Randy Savage, both big contributions to the legacy. But in my head, the guys that I mentioned in the honorable mention in the next four are the big ones here. And I'm going to get the first one out of the way. Hulk Hogan. I am not a Hogan fan. You grow up a Hogan fan because you don't know any better. And, he was the all-American superhero, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. I remember, watching as a kid and seeing, somebody like rip his cross necklace off his chest. And I want to say that they pretended to stab him in the chest with it, and I was mortified. I remember watching him turn and become part of the, not just become part of, but become the NWO as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And I remember being heartbroken, why would he do this to us? Fantastic storytelling with it. Awful in the ring, and which is funny because if you watch some of his stuff from his time, in when he would wrestle in Japan and stuff, he was far better in the ring than he ever showed in WWE, WWF, even WCW. I mean, he was literally oh, we're going to throw punches and we're going to run across the ring in a clothesline, a shoulder tackle, a body slam, very basic, very 80s. And then, you're going to get the better of me. And all of a sudden I'm going to Hulk up and, I'm going to do the point. And, the whole, you're going to punch me and it's not going to phase me. I'm going to no sell. And then, here comes the big boot and the leg drop. And, I need hip surgery in my 50s because I landed on my ass so often. There is no WrestleMania without Hulk Hogan. There just isn't. The first one, WrestleMania 1, and really the first 5 centered around him so much. He was the sell, he was the draw. The people he was going against, and you can say what you want, the Bret Hart Yokozuna where, Hogan's got to come in and win the title back. Instead of Bret Hart having his day, Hulk Hogan has his day. And you can talk about the politicking and everything. The man knew how to play the game. No pun intended with the Triple H thing there. Just knew how to play the game to get what he wanted and to have a career that very, very few have come close to having otherwise. And opportunity after opportunity, chance after chance. Leaving the company to join the rival and basically spin the ratings of the Monday Night Wars was, he was kind of the start of it, right? He was one of the first big names to jump ship, and then he recruited other guys and to do that and then still be let in and be kicked out of he's no longer on a Legends contract. He's no longer on this. He's no longer on the website. He made racial commentary on this show or comments about his wife and his daughter and her friend or whatever. The dude's just done so many stupid things, and now they're out here parading him around with his beer. That's how much this dude's reputation tracks. Although I do think it's funny that he's getting booed out of almost every arena they bring him into. But you have to understand that there is no WrestleMania without Vince, and there is no WrestleMania without Vince and Hulk. They centered around Hulk. Whoever he was going up against the idea was you're going to go against Hulk and we're going to make you a star because Hulk had the star power to drag you up with him. Say what you will about the man, say what you will about his practices, say what you will about his ability in the ring. There is no denying that at one point Hulkamania was the biggest thing in professional wrestling, and Hulkamania led to WrestleMania. So we wouldn't be having WrestleMania week without Hulkamania, and you don't have Hulkamania without Hulk Hogan. So unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, Hulk Hogan on my list, on Mount Rushmore of WrestleMania performers. From the modern, or from the historic Hulk Hogan to the modern Hulk Hogan, very few people have the resume that John Cena has. And you can't talk about WrestleMania without talking about John Cena. I mean, the dude, 20 years of a career, and the last 3 or 4, he's been kind of MIA because of doing stuff in Hollywood and everything else. Like, doing the same thing he made fun of The Rock for, which I think is funny, but that's beside the point. I mean, we're talking about a dude, you can think back on his WrestleMania entrances, the gangster car. There was one time where he ran down amongst a sea of clones, which were every dude who even remotely had the same build as him in his outfit with the hat pulled down over the eyes so you couldn't see who it was, just stand there doing the "you can't see me" thing as Cena goes through his entrance and and goes down. Fantastic. I mean, this dude is such a name, such a draw, that in the last few years, the last few times he's been around for WrestleMania, he did the once in a lifetime with The Rock, and he headlined it over all the title matches. And then they did it again, and they headlined it again because it was a title match, I think. Well, maybe the first one was the title match. I don't remember. But like they ran it back and they headlined WrestleMania twice with the same match. Billing it was once in a lifetime, and then once in a lifetime round 2. What? The dude, like, he, JBL used to call him Big Match John. Cena delivered at the biggest times and the biggest stages. You could have his number the entire way, and he was that guy that found a way in the biggest moments under the brightest lights to get it done. They view him as somebody similar to Hogan and Stone Cold before him. Ushering in, the Ruthless Aggression era was directly tied to his catchphrase in the ring with Kurt Angle, and then the whole Dr. Thugonomics thing. Thank God they got him away from that haircut and those trunks. And then just the hustle, loyalty, respect when he got away from that and just became Super Cena. The list, the graveyard of careers he buried at WrestleMania with John Cena's quote unquote shovel. He has had matches with some of the best of them. And of late, they've even toyed into that where like he had like a almost like a cinematic match, we'll call it, with The Undertaker, where it was just this like weird vignette thing where, because Taker couldn't quite do it, but they still wanted the aura and the allure of The Undertaker at WrestleMania. So they brought Cena out to drag it up a little bit. The biggest ones are were with The Rock, but I mean the dude's had so many WrestleMania matches you can't name them all probably off the top of your head. And he found a way to drag The Rock, who hadn't been in the ring for years, to 2 legitimately decent matches when people would talk crap about Cena and how the 5 moves of doom, and then he had the 6th move of doom as a joke, like that weird like power up punch thing that he did. But he the Rock was not in ring shape when the 2 of them got in the ring for once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime. So much so that The Rock got hurt the first time, and then but he still Cena was able to drag him to a decent match regardless, which is impressive in its own right. But when you talk about WrestleMania, especially recent history WrestleMania in the last 20 years, John Cena's the guy, whether you like it or not. You can see him, and he's all over the history of WrestleMania. That being said, my last 2 were the easiest 2 to pick. And if you've heard everybody else I've talked about, you're going, you know who this is, right? You know who these are. There is no such thing as a bigger name in WrestleMania than The Undertaker. This man, he would be on my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers. His theme songs, even back in the day when, the weird gloves and like painted his face like he was actually a dead guy and everything else. The allure behind this dude. And he's a guy who up until the last 5 years, right? Like his matches only got better as he got older. We're talking about a dude who some of the best matches of his career were when he was at an age where most guys can't even do it anymore. 2 of the best matches ever at WrestleMania happened between the two guys on the top two on my list here. But I mean, we're talking about a guy who Shawn Michaels, Undertaker 1, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker 2 with Michaels' career on the line, the streak versus the career. Then Undertaker versus Triple H, which they legitimately had Triple H beat the ever-loving hell out of the Undertaker. And the Undertaker locks in Hell's Gate at the end and chokes out Triple H. And then the Undertaker's got to be carried to the back. Like they sold it so well that Triple H was just the better guy that day, but Taker was just not. He was too good to be beaten at WrestleMania. And one of those amazing, like people look back on that like it was a really not a good match. And what it was long-term storytelling, which if you know anything now about Triple H, now that he's doing the booking, he's big on long-term stories, right? So he basically came out because he retired Michaels the year before after beating him twice. The conversation was, well, now I got to get revenge for my friend. You ended my friend's career while we were in the run of our DX reunion. Because if you remember, the way they set up match 2 between Michaels and Taker was they won match of the year. And after that, Michaels and Triple H were in the run of a DX reunion to the point that I believe Triple H got hurt, and there was like a push where like in his DX gear, Michaels was running around and he teamed up with Cena for a minute. They won the tag titles while they were in a feud for Cena's title. Michaels ended up not being able to pull off the win, but I digress. He ended up costing them their tag titles because he's like, I don't want the tag titles to get between us because I'm going for the world title. And it was like this whole thing. And like when he accepted the Slammy Award for match of the year with Undertaker at the last WrestleMania, he snapped and was like, I had him beat. I can beat that guy. And he kept like messing with the Undertaker until he accepted the match. He stopped running around with Triple H. Like he basically told him, he told Triple H, I'm putting my career on the line. If I can't beat him at WrestleMania, I don't deserve to still be here. And like he cost the Undertaker a title. He cost the Undertaker the Royal Rumble. I mean, he went all in and, went after it and then lost and retired and put on one of the best matches of his career in the moment. And then they used that to start the Triple H feud. And then the following year, Taker chased Triple H, was like, you walked around telling people that you beat me, even though I won the match. And I want to prove to you that I am the better man. And it set up they called it the end of an era match between Triple H and Taker in Hell in a Cell with Michaels as the guest referee. And you think, I mean, let's talk about Michaels being a great seller. His selling as a referee was better than most guys sell as performers, as wrestlers in the ring. That's all I'm saying. But like, I mean, telling the long-term story there, he had a great match with Bray Wyatt. Personally, I think if somebody was going to break the streak at WrestleMania, which I haven't even touched on the streak itself, it should have been Bray Wyatt, but they didn't go that route. It is what it is. But I mean, even in defeat, when they did finally snap the streak and they snapped it to Lesnar, the shock and awe that came over, I mean, we're talking about a dude who was 21-0, right? It was 21-0 before Lesnar. And then when they broke the streak to Lesnar, it was, oh my God. Like the conversation was always, who's the young stud that's going to get the rub to take this from him? Because Taker's old school. Taker, whether you listen to his podcasts, his one Dead Man shows, whatever it may be, he talks about things that, doing things right in the business. And one of the things he talks about doing right in the business is, you go out on your back. You go out putting over the next generation. And it was something he felt the generation before him didn't do well enough, that a lot of those guys hung on for way too long and wanted the limelight on themselves for far too long. And it's something that he was a big proponent of. Like, you go out on your back, you go out giving the rub to the next guy. And that's all there is to it. The man was a consummate professional about everything. A leader in the locker room. He found a way to make the aura of being an allegedly dead guy be a thing for far longer. Like, K-Fob was long dead, but people were still like, no, The Undertaker totally just shot lightning at somebody. That was cool. Yeah, no, that's a dead guy. No, he was dead. And then when they buried him, he came back as an alive guy. And then they buried him again, and he came back as the dead guy again. That was a thing that happened. And through this whole thing, they built this streak and the aura around the streak that, again, people lost their minds, their careers to the streak. Going after the streak, wanted to be the guy to beat the streak. And those matches later in his career got better and better. Again, those 4 against Shawn Michaels and Triple H as a collective were fantastic. Fantastic storytelling. Even when he was hurt, his match against Lesnar ended sooner than it was supposed to, but it was still really, really good. And that's with him having a concussion. Hard to have a WrestleMania conversation without The Undertaker. And you can tell that ever since then, they've been struggling to find something that means enough in the realm of WrestleMania to replace the Undertaker streak match, because they don't have it anymore. One, The Undertaker is never going to wrestle again. Thank God. He's too old. When they brought him, when it was him, Michaels, Triple H, and Kane in Saudi Arabia, when Kane was like the active mayor of Knoxville and was in Saudi Arabia wrestling with his, like, in his mask and stuff, doing the whole undead Brothers of Destruction thing. Hilarious. I don't care about the politics side of it. Just funny as all hell that the mayor was in Saudi Arabia dressed as a demon wrestling with a dead guy against a Generation X like 6 years ago. Anyway, but hard to have a conversation about the man, about WrestleMania, about either one. It's hard to have a conversation about The Undertaker without talking about WrestleMania, and it's hard to talk about WrestleMania without talking about The Undertaker. And that, to me, deserves a solidified spot on Mount Rushmore for WrestleMania performers. And with that, the last one, the big one, how do you have a Mount Rushmore conversation about the Mount Rushmore of WrestleMania wrestlers, WrestleMania performers, and not include Mr. WrestleMania? There is not a person on this list that I've talked about that you'd be hard pressed to find didn't have something in some way, shape, or form with Shawn Michaels, Mr. WrestleMania. I mean, got retired by The Undertaker, went back-to-back matches in the streak, was in the second Triple H match as a special guest referee, and like I said, kind of stole the show with his selling. And just the emotion he showed on his face throughout the whole thing. Like when they did the super kick pedigree 1-2 kick out, and Michaels like crawled into the corner and was like legitimately sobbing. Like, what do we have to do to end this guy? And just the whole storytelling of that match was fantastic. The Ric Flair retirement match. You want to talk about a match that'll tug at your heartstrings when you see like Michaels telling the story throughout the whole thing, couldn't pull the trigger on Sweet Chin Music 2-3 times, and then finally tuned up the band, and Flair just in shambles, just like standing up, hands still up, saying "Come on, come on," and just the "I'm sorry, I love you," and then kicked his head off his shoulders, pinned him, and then laid there and hugged him in tears. Was fantastic. I mean, it was poetry in motion. This dude you want everything we talked about, the entering WrestleMania on a zip line, the heaven versus hell entrance, the Undertaker coming up from the depths of hell with like the hands waving from the underworld to try to drag him back down. And then Michaels comes down, descending from the heavens, just steering into the whole born again thing. Taker wearing all black, Michaels wearing all white, like just everything about Shawn Michaels personified WrestleMania. And that goes with the fact that he missed. I mean, we talked about, Angle, who had to take some time off for different reasons. We talked about Lesnar, who, left and then came back 10, 15 years later or whatever it was. Like, Michaels missed a good chunk of time during the prime of his career to a severe back injury that they thought he'd never wrestle from again. And he is still considered Mr. WrestleMania, and he may have been better after the injury. Argue with your mom about it. I don't know. In my opinion, late Michaels and late Taker put on some of the best matches of their careers. And we're talking about a dude who at one WrestleMania was said to have had Shawn Michaels had a wrestling match with a ladder, and there just happened to be another guy in the ring with him. Like, that's how good Michaels was early. Like when we're talking about Shawn Michaels, I mean, WrestleMania 13, fantastic match. I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, that's the one, where they say he had a wrestling match with a ladder and there was just another guy in the ring. Unbelievable. Nobody else could pull that. Nobody. But here we are, Mr. WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels, HBK, the Heartbreak Kid. So there you have it. My Mount Rushmore: Hogan, Cena, Taker, Michaels. Top 4 on the Mount Rushmore list. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope if you are a WrestleMania fan or a wrestling fan, you enjoy this weekend. It is our weekend to shine, boys and girls. Thanks for tuning in. As always, guys, and this one hits a little bit closer to home because anybody who knows me locally, there's a guy a good chunk of us played softball with, just went through some hard times and made a decision that is tough on everybody that you're around. So for anybody out there struggling, anybody out there who is, kind of fighting it a little bit, just keep your head down, keep going forward. It can't rain forever. Hard times don't last. I promise. You will make it out. You will be okay. And you do have people who love you and support you. Feel free to give them a call and give me a call. Anytime you need it, I'm here. There are people in your life who matter, who mean something to you. So, and who you mean the world to. So, you're allowed to hurt. You're allowed to be in pain, but you're not allowed to quit. So keep moving forward, and the sun will shine someday. I promise. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been another episode of Mount Josmore. I will catch you next time in a not so wrestling heavy episode.